customers and clients' requests are catered for by way of a text number that the DJs regularly promote. And our multilingual male and female DJs are some of the best available. For further information, including terms and conditions, email info@celebrations.co.uk.
Assalamualaikum. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're well. Just about to go to live in the next 30 seconds or so. Thank you for joining us as always. Assalamualaikum. Good evening. My name is Mr. Ali. As always, thank you for joining us on a Tuesday evening between the hours of 8 to 9 p.m. And I hope you're well and you've had a fantastic week. How are you feeling? I think we are, seems to be in the midst of the end of the lockdown. I think the social distancing seems to have gone out of the window. But nonetheless, I think this week has been dominated by events in America with I was going to say the murder, but they haven't been convicted, but certainly the killing of George Floyd. And hence why a lot of people have gone to the streets now. And initially it was all peaceful protest, but I think we have seen small elements who have decided to use this as an opportunity to do some rioting, and they've sort of hijacked it in a negative kind of way. But nonetheless, I think the cause is very just. I think Black Lives Matters is something that I think needs a coherent strategy. It needs something that with demands and action. So, after everything that settles down, there are tangible benefits that the BAME community, the Black community can say, look, this has resulted in our lives being better in such a scenario. So George Floyd's death is not wasted and not in vain. So I think, I don't know, I'm going to actually introduce my guest, Miss Abda Khan. Thank you for joining us and to our humble studios of Radio Aapki Awaz. Thank you for joining us. And I know you're not here to talk about Black Lives Matter, but I just want to get your opinion about what's happening in America.
I think it's really taken a head of steam at the moment, hasn't it? I think probably there's been so many inequalities and bad feelings that have come to the surface that I think it was kind of inevitable. I think in a way that this was going to happen, and I think lockdown, a pandemic, and then you've got illegal killings by police officers, and I think it's all sort of come to a head, and I think it's made people realise of all colours and backgrounds actually that how much inequality there is, and everybody's kind of going on Twitter and talking about their own experiences of racism and things like that. So.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I've actually evolved the Black Lives Matter to say every life matters, irrespective of irrespective of your background. So whether you're male, female, whether you're Black, Asian, whatever your background, I think it's important for us to not discriminate and not to use our bigotry to put people to one side. And also, I think just to sort of, again, I mean, I don't want to sort of hijack the reason why you're here, but I think it's also worth noting that, in every sphere, whether it's health, education, whether it is employment, unfortunately, people from a BAME background do, whether it's through conscious or unconscious bias, do suffer. And just to give you one small example, when, this was actually polled as well, when applications were submitted under the names of a foreign sounding name, the chance of getting employment was much less. And as soon as that name changed to a Anglo-Saxon name, they were quickly called in for an interview. They were then realized at the interview, obviously the person was of a different background, but the chance of actually getting an interview was certainly less when you have a foreign sounding name. So I think we've got still a lot of work, but I always do stress, I think we're very fortunate to be living and growing and bringing up our families within the UK. I think this is one of the better countries in the world for tolerance and for acceptance as well. And I think if we can sort of move on the conversation to the number of deaths within the BAME community as a result of COVID, we've now noticed that there is a times 4 disproportionate rate in terms of actually getting the disease, but also dying because of...
Yeah, they've picked up on various factors, haven't they? So people who are from a BAME community are much more likely to die from it. People who live in deprived areas, which also happen to be a lot of the time people from BAME communities.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of overlap there in terms of the most deprived areas and the most deprived communities.
Yes.
And so you've got, I think Bangladeshi people are actually very high
Very
up there
high.
in terms of proportion of deaths, and black men as well, but also not far behind that you've got Asian
Pakistani,
people.
absolutely.
So it is very much, and I think this is another dimension to it here in the UK in terms of Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, because
absolutely.
obviously the disproportionate number of deaths that we've had both within the NHS and with the public has made people wonder what is going on, and we need some guidance on that.
I think this just shows, and the government have delayed the publication of the report, which wasn't far-ranging enough, so they didn't go into the socio-economic reasons as to why these deaths are. But I think it just shows that as a community, as a BAME community, our diet is very poor. The health facilities that we get provided are very poor. So that now it provides a business case for the councils and the government to make sure that we have the sufficient resources.
I think this does have to be looked at, and I think actually what a lot of people won't know is there was a university study done that actually found that black Muslim females in this country are actually the most underprivileged in a lot of senses in terms of jobs, in terms of social and economic factors. So I think there's a lot here that needs to be addressed, and I think that report really, I know the government is saying that they couldn't publish it because they need to look into it further, but I think we do need some answers quickly, because this pandemic isn't going away quickly, so we need to know what we're dealing with. We need to know what we're grappling with before we can sort of like make important decisions as to how we go forward.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Abda, for giving me the gateway now to actually bring us nicely into the reason why you're here and something that you're really passionate about. So for those listeners who are just joining in, as you know, we are still under a relative lockdown. We are still social distancing, and it's been an enormous impact on our families, our mental health. And the fact that, a lot of people are now not work, they're furloughed, and if they're self-employed, they've been sort of asked to stay at home. So, these are people that not normally spend so much time at home. The children are off school, so they're spending all their time at home. And if you've got 3 or 4 kids, it's an absolute nightmare, I can imagine, especially when the sun is out.
Yes.
It's getting quite hot, and it's also your income for the week has really taken a hit. So you've got so many pressures that as a family that you're sort of taking on board. And as always, not that there's any excuse at all, you can imagine that relationship between the partners, whether you're married or whether you're sort of in civil or whatever the relationship that you have under that household takes a real hit. But before we actually go into that, I just want to sort of, first of all, there's a lot of love for you. A lot of people, I'm just going to read some out if I can. Nazreen come and said, love to hear Abda. Abda, strength in her integrity, passion in her speech. There's another person, Assalamu alaikum, from Abda. Many thanks to Abda to come out to the show despite her busy schedule. Thank you. We salute you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So already I think you've got a bit of a following. Great show. Managing to watch it live. Abdullah Rahman, BEM from Borsal Heath Forum as well. So there's quite a few people actually. Oh wow, you are... we miss Uncle Umar Afzal, absolutely.
Well, let's hope we can impart some important information.
Absolutely, yeah. Zina, thank you. There has been some voices who are speaking about the fact that BAME staff are on the road, rotating COVID words. Okay, that's fine. I think we're going to go into that, but certainly a lot of people are sort of giving showering you with their love. So before we even go to today's topic, I just want to allow the listeners to get a bit of insight into your background and why is women issues, if I'm right in saying, are so important to you, and what's your credentials, so to speak?
Okay, so I was actually born up in Bradford.
I could take the Yorkshire accent.
Bradford, to immigrant parents, like a lot of people who came from Pakistan in the 1960s. So I moved to the Midlands probably 26 years ago now. So it's been a long time. I'm actually a solicitor by profession. Spent most of my life working as a lawyer. But a few years ago I decided to start writing fiction, and I've written 2 novels. One's called Stained and one is called Razia, which came out last year. And I do write about quite difficult issues. So Stained was about so-called honour abuse. It was about sexual abuse as well. It was about that trust you have in people, and when that trust is betrayed. It was about one young girl's journey into how she copes with certain things that happen to her, and it was quite an empowering message in the end, I would have to say. And Razia is about modern slavery. Razia is set both in London and Lahore, in Islamabad, and a little bit in New York. And it follows the story of a young woman who's brought over from Pakistan by a very rich and powerful family and kept as a slave. And she actually belongs to a family of slaves who work on a brick kiln just outside Lahore. So it's, again, I wanted to raise awareness about modern slavery because it's not something that people know much about. So I'm happy to come and do, you asking about
Please, maybe
so
once
another time to talk about
once things settle down, we'll get Abda talk about modern slavery as well, which is a real issue. So and I'm just writing another novel about gaslighting, which is a form of domestic abuse. So and obviously we're going to discuss domestic abuse today. And I've also, I'm really alhamdulillah, very fortunate. I've been recognised for my work. I won British Muslim Woman of the Year last year. The British Muslim Woman of the Year. Oh wow!
I need to get that
so
one
we've got an award-winning person here, British Muslim Woman of the Year,
the British
2019.
Muslim Awards last year.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And I was at the, I was highly commended as a finalist at the NatWest Asian Women of Achievement Awards a few years ago as well. So alhamdulillah, I've been really lucky in that sense. But I've also worked with Women's Aid as a trustee. I've been a helpline volunteer as well. So I've had a lot of contact with domestic violence in that sense. But also through my work as a lawyer, I've done a variety of different types of work, and I've done domestic violence work in the past. I don't do it anymore. And again, I've just come across so many women, so many different stories, and that's why I started writing actually, because I felt as though there wasn't much contemporary British fiction out there that depicts these kind of narratives, these kind of stories that exist within our communities, but doing it in a sensitive way. My aim is not to, offend anybody, but at the same time, we can't shy away from talking about difficult topics. I mean, the Prophet, peace be upon him, talked about difficult topics all the time, and if you look at the great leaders of the past, they weren't shy about tackling difficult things. So I think in our community, we do need to work together and talk about difficult things and try and resolve them. And I think we all have a part to play. Me, you, mosques, imams, people who work out in the community. We cannot all do our bit. I can't do a lot by myself, but if I do a little bit and you do a little bit, we can all make a difference.
I think what was said, Abda, that was some intro into your background, and the reason why you're passionate is because you've seen and witnessed at first hand the detrimental effect that he has on the individual and also the family infrastructure. So well said. And also, as a radio station, there is no topic that we don't discuss, especially on my show. If we don't discuss it, then unfortunately, one, that doesn't get resolved, and also then other, people with other agendas tend to use that as a stick to beat us up with as a community. I am talking about. So that's understandable. So normally, I would say, domestic violence, I suppose from the other side, from a devil's advocate, is this something that, yourselves and people that work within women's sort of, organizations are inflating in order for you to sort of get some funding, in order for you to be recognized? Or is this a genuine problem, not just within the Asian Pakistani community, but amongst the, the indigenous wider community as well? Do you have real statistics, real data to back up what you're saying?
So absolutely, it's not a figment of our imagination. First of all, can I just say that men do suffer domestic violence as well? But I'm not going to talk about men today, because the majority of domestic violence
about
are
80%
women, 85% or so. But obviously there are helplines out there. If there's any men listening and they have suffered domestic violence, they can contact one of the helplines and get help. But no, domestic violence is a real problem. There were 1.6 million women affected by domestic violence in the year to the end of March 2019. Those are official statistics. The police receive on average 100 calls an hour related to domestic violence. Okay. Now, if you put into the mix that only around about 18% of women report domestic abuse within 12 months. So a lot of women will suffer for a very long time before they report abuse to the police. Now, the most shocking incident is the fact that ordinarily 2 women a week are killed by their partner or ex-partner. In this country, every single week 2 women are killed. Now, since lockdown began, 5 women a week have been killed.
Oh wow, so it's really
so
gone up,
the death rate
hasn't it?
has gone up by 160%. So that shows you the effect of lockdown, and that has included children as well being killed as part of that. It's absolutely not an exaggeration. It's just that if you're not touched by domestic violence or you don't come across it, then perhaps in your world it doesn't exist. But in somebody else's world, it really does exist. And during lockdown, it's a very difficult time, because you get that pressure cooker effect, you know, where everybody's at home at the same time, and there's nowhere for people, you know, for victims to go, to be honest with you, when it's locked down. So no, these statistics are real. The helplines have had about 120% increase in calls since lockdown began.
So you're giving quite a lot of data there. I'm just going to sort of take a bit of a sort of breath, really, and just let everyone digest all the information that you've given. And I know, I suppose, in one way, you've mentioned that, you know, there's only 18% of women that actually go on to report it, and even then it's after a long time. Because I suppose the perpetrator of this, and in this case we are talking about women getting abused, so let's just keep it on that. So the male counterpart is very good at you know, hiding and sort of, you know, using techniques to sort of cover some of the bruises and the physical signs of what they're doing. But I think it's worth, maybe for the listeners, I think, first of all, actually allowing them to understand what is covered by domestic abuse or violence. Because I know, was it about 18 months ago when the government actually also included mental and emotional abuse. So, you know, if you are mentally abusing someone, that is now categorized as just one point of domestic violence.
So you'll be shocked to know that there's no actual statutory definition of domestic abuse or domestic violence, but it's basically any kind of controlling or coercive behavior. And it's not just physical, it can be emotional, it can be financial, it can be sexual. So there's whole lots of difference. It can be psychological. So you've got things like not only psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse, but also things like harassment, stalking, online abuse. These all kind of, and then things like, you know, the so-called honour-based abuse, forced marriage. These all fall within the category of domestic abuse. So in one way, if you look at it, it has so many different sides to it. You know, domestic abuse isn't just somebody being hit by another person. It can be so much more than that. And to be honest with you, sometimes the controlling coercive behaviour is the most difficult for others to see, because a bruise you would, even if you know a bruise somebody would probably see, but the controlling coercive behaviour, the emotional blackmail and emotional abuse is actually more difficult for other people to see.
I suppose more and more partners also use, I mean, let's just use a stereotypical example of the woman stays at home, looks after the kids and, you know, nurtures the home and stuff, and the male person goes home. So he has the earning power, he has the financial muscle, and they use that as an example of getting what they want and manipulating their partner.
Yeah, it's all different scenarios, but you would be surprised at how many women who are educated, career women, still suffer domestic abuse. It's just that our perception is that it's usually going to be women who stay at home, but that's actually not true. So I think that we have to break down these barriers sometimes and actually realise that, you know, women in any given situation can be subjected to abuse, because it's about power, to be honest with you. It's about the power that somebody holds over somebody else. Any kind of abuse is about power.
I do remember a court case, actually. I was reading in a newspaper whereby it went to court, and it was about domestic violence and abuse, and the defendant was arguing that how can I do domestic abuse or violence on my partner who's educated, who's sort of a solicitor, she was a solicitor, it just can't happen. And he was using that as an argument. So, you know, there's no, you know, creed, there's no, you know, stature that, you know, is a barrier for you not suffering or suffering from domestic violence. So let's put that out there.
I mean, in our communities, for example, a woman might be a doctor or a solicitor, but if the husband says, well, you know, you're going to bring shame to your family if you speak about what's going on in this house, that can be a form of control and form of power. So it can take a lot of different guises, to be honest.
And as a community, as you mentioned earlier, you know, the Pakistani sort of Indian subcontinent community, we're very good at, you know, not, you know, we're going to use the word, you know, besti. I think that's, you know, a familiar word to everyone, that, you know, we don't want to bring any kind of shame onto our family, because we all sort of, want to sort of be the perfect couple or the perfect family in front of the community or the wider family. And there's that sort of bit of pressure that you don't want to be the one that sort of,
actually a lot of time the women when the women are suffering abuse, sadly, they're told by others to have sabr, to be patient. But nothing in Islam allows a woman to be abused. Nothing at all. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the last sermon of the Prophet, he talked about being fair to your wife being just. So I think that sometimes we need to educate
Absolutely.
people to actually realize, because people get religion and culture mixed up and cultural practices mixed up, and I think it's really important for people to realize that actually you've just got to treat people with dignity, and no one has the right to abuse another person. It's just simply wrong.
Well said. And I think we must also put the message out there that anyone that is doing it, the punishment is very severe. We are talking about custodial sentences for a long time. So the government, the agencies, the judicial system take this very, very heavily and will just out their punishment accordingly. So just put that out there. And just one thing before we actually go to COVID, I want to sort of talk about the incidence rate of domestic abuse within the Pakistani Indian sort of culture compared to the white culture. Is there anything that shows that we're far more involved in that sort of stuff, or not really?
I think it's. I don't really want to label it as just being an Asian problem. I think from my work with the Women's Aid, it's pretty universal. Okay, but I think it's a different type in our community. I think we have the honour-based abuse and the forced marriage, which has a different dimension. And in some communities we have FGM as well. Yeah. And all these are forms of abuse. And it's not just your partner. It can be your father, your brother. Sure. It can be another relative. So certainly I've come across cases where, it is actually really terrible what happens within our communities. You've also got the added factor of a lot of times when the women come from abroad. Yeah. And of course, they don't have anybody that they can turn to. No. So what you might find is that more of those women are accessing refuge. And so it might seem like there's a higher proportion of women suffering. So I've worked in refugees, and I've noticed there's a higher proportion of Pakistani and Asian women. But what you find is they've come from abroad and they don't have anywhere to go to. They don't have parents here or relatives or friends that they can turn to. So sometimes I think you've got to treat the stats with a bit of, sort of nuance.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just going to read a few comments and then we'll get down to how we are sort of coping with the pressure that we are under and how that has gone on to affect these figures that you mentioned about, with the increase in both abuse but also deaths in the last 3 months or so. If I can, just let's start from the bottom actually. Oh, wow. Oh wow, guys, I'm just gonna read through as much as I can. Nasreen Qamar, wow, she's on a roll. Wow, it's like an essay here. Yes, there are many cases right under our noses. I remember working in a school locally where the wife was abusing the husband. The stigma within the community was more detrimental to the husband and the children than the actual violence. So so there's female to male violence as well. Forced marriages could lead to domestic violence. Yes, absolutely. We will get Abda on now, maybe in a couple of months' time to talk about FGM and also honour killing as well. Excellent and courageous to be discussing such a taboo subject. Please also remember the abuse where men are the victims. Yes, so there's that sort of counter. So Kramasab, thank you very much. I hope you're well, and we'd love to have you back on the studio as well. And Nasreen, in schools working in, I think that may have been a repeat. Domestic violence is a huge impact in our community, affecting our young children. This issue needs to be support. This issue needs to be highlighted, and you're doing a great job. Fantastic, thank you. Is domestic violence and honour-based killings linked?
Yes, they are linked. They are honour-based abuse is a form of domestic abuse as well. Yeah. Taboo
subjects in our community that need to be addressing. Bless you for raising this awareness as well. So all in all, I think there seems to be a lot of people that are applauding you for coming in and talk about this subject that you're championing. And also the fact that, let's try to sort of make it even with sort of men also involved.
Yeah.
And Abda has made that clear, but at the same time, I think it's worth realizing that 85% of all domestic cases that are reported are from men to women. And we are going to be focusing majority of our discussion around that, if that's okay. And please continue to share your anecdotes, share your stories, whatever you've heard. Please share that, because, it is these real life stories that bring the stats and all the what we're discussing to life, if that's okay as well. So, and same with yourself as well, Abda. Whatever we're discussing, if you've got real life stories, obviously leave the names and everything, details, obviously to one side, but the rest of the stuff we would love to sort of hear as well. So, so okay, let's bring it to domestic violence and also COVID. As I mentioned earlier, we are spending a lot more time with our partners, with our wives, and we're sort of under each other's feet. The kids are at home as well. The finances have taken a hit. And all across the board, I think there is now, a pressure cooker building in our homes. It's almost now been 3 months now since the start of lockdown. And, would you say it was inevitable that because we weren't able to sort of go for too long to our relatives' houses, to our friends' houses, we weren't able to go to the parks for too long? Certainly in the early days, we weren't able to get that sort of bit of a space that you need sometimes for a healthy relationship, that it was inevitable that there was going to be an increase and a spike in domestic violence.
Yeah. What you've got to understand is that for women who suffer from domestic abuse, they're treading on eggshells as it is most of the time.
Yeah.
Because they might do something wrong, which then triggers a bout of violence. And normally when women try to escape domestic abuse, right, the man isn't there, so he's out to work. Or they might use the opportunity when they go to school to collect the children and then confide in a teacher. I've had many calls on the helpline where the teachers have phoned and said, got the mum here with the children, she needs a place in refuge because she's suffered another episode of domestic violence and she's had enough, kind of thing. So that happens regularly. So what you find is when it's lockdown, the man isn't going out to work or see his friends or, whatever leisure time and work time that he would spend outside the house. So what you then find is that then the woman is trapped, and she doesn't have the opportunity to find help because he's always there. So I think this is the thing that's probably, led to, sadly, more deaths. I mean, 2 deaths a week is atrocious anyway. We shouldn't have 2 women a week dying from domestic violence. No. So 5 women a week is just terrible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to read out some more comments as well, so if that's okay.
Yeah.
Shanaz Zahur, lovely to hear your voice and sharing such valuable information, Abda. Thank you very much. Shanaz Zahur, talk and tell us about gaslighting, please. Is that your new book?
Yeah, I've written about gaslighting. Yeah. If we get time at the end, I will mention.
I think the most important thing we need to connect ourselves with is our beloved messenger, how he teaches us about how to behave and treat our wives as well. When people have such inspiration, they will mend their ways and improve. And I think you've touched on that really, in terms of, you've got the best examples of human mankind, who in his last sermon showed us how to treat our partners and our wives. So I think, if we are...
I do hope if there are any Maulanas or Imams listening, that when lockdown finishes and mosques open, I do, like, if they can think about the 5 women a week who have been killed.
Absolutely.
I do hope that they will maybe bring this into their khutbahs a bit more, talk about these issues a bit more, be a bit more brave. And I know some really good imams who do talk about these things, but perhaps not enough.
We need more of that, don't we? We need sort of young English imams maybe in their Friday sermons talking about... And I think someone actually made a good point, actually. Even young people who are about to get married, really, about what is marriage, what are the fundamental values, how to treat each other. And I think that's very important, actually, because I don't think that actually happens often enough.
The problem is if they haven't had a great example growing up, then the mosque might be a good place where they can actually, get guidance. So, and I think the Friday sermon is khutbah is a great opportunity for the Maulana to actually send out these messages. You've got a captive audience.
Yeah.
You've got hundreds of men there, and what better opportunity to make a difference to somebody's life.
No, most definitely. So for those of you who are just joining in, I hope you're well. We've been sort of on the air now for roughly about 33 minutes now. If you want to dial in and speak to a sister here, Abda, then please, you're more than welcome to. The number is 0121 682 9735, and certainly put your points or anything that you wish to, and she will do her best to either answer it or certainly add to the conversation if we can. So today we are talking about an issue that I wanted to discuss for many weeks before, but one thing led to another. But I think now finally we have managed to get Abda here, who is all about championing women's rights, and in particular we are discussing how the previous 11-12 weeks, in terms of the fact that we are spending so much time at home with incomes reduced, with the hot weather out there, the children being at home, and the fact that also you're not able to access the support services that once you maybe previously were able to, or sometimes even sort of going, as a woman going to your own family or your friends, just for a bit of sort of moral support that wasn't able to sort of happen because obviously shielding and people weren't able to sort of go to other people's houses. That support network was eroded or wasn't there, and then all of a sudden you have to cope on your own. So that mental pressure then it just gets magnified, and all of a sudden you're sort of just taking everything more, and hence what that may sort of just go on to explain that before lockdown there were roughly 2 women that were dying as a result of domestic violence, and at the moment that has increased to 5, and that's more than 100% increase. And just when I was just sort of having a bit of a read through about this topic as well, there was an increase of 25% of calls that went to a support network group called Refuge. So that just gives you an indication. That's just one organization that had an increase in phone calls and online requests for support, and that had increased by more than a quarter. So that just gives you an idea as well. What do you think about some of the stuff that I've said there, Abda?
Well, I think the problem with the lockdown, like I said before, was that it's very difficult for women to, where they think that they really need to escape, it's very difficult for them to escape. You've got to remember that some women are controlled to the degree where they can't actually go out or do anything without that person's consent. But what I did want to briefly mention was there might be somebody listening right now who's in that situation where her husband is home all the time and she's subject to domestic violence and she wants to know how she can get away. So I think the thing with domestic abuse is it can blow up any time. So what I would just want to talk about quickly, if it's okay, just for a few minutes,
sure, is
just talk about what to do if you need to leave. How can you prepare for this?
Okay. Interesting.
So anybody in this situation, you know who you are. If you're in that situation, you think things are getting worse. I might just have to leave one of these days. I might just have to go. What you need to do is a couple of things you can do. So you need to keep your car keys, your bank card, a bit of cash, and if you can hide it, an overnight bag to one side. If it's difficult for you, see if somebody can do an overnight bag for you, if you've got a friend or a family member who can do that for you, okay? Your identification documents, your driving license, your passport, have those handy, very close if you need to leave very quickly. If you've got grown-up children, like children who understand instructions, agree a code word with them.
Okay.
If I shout red, come out of your rooms, we're going. Okay. So, but that's if they're older. Obviously, if they're very young, they won't understand that. And can I just say that at the moment, train travel is free for any woman who's escaping domestic violence. Okay, if they need to get away. And also, there's no punishment in terms of breaking lockdown or anything like that. The police have said that all you have to say is you're escaping domestic abuse, and that's not a problem at all. Now, when you're in the house, always keep your mobile phone charged. And this is a good idea. Some women out there listening will never have told anybody about the abuse that they're suffering. But now that they're in lockdown, I think now might be a good time. So if you know somebody that you trust and you don't think that you'll be able to get help, but you could text somebody a code word, agree a code word with your sister or a best friend so they can ring the police for you. Okay. So, you never know when you might be in that situation. If violence does flare up in the house, try and avoid running to any room that's got any weapons in it. Try and avoid going to the kitchen where there are knives. Try and avoid going to the garage where there are hammers and tools. try and go somewhere safer, like the bathroom, lock the door, something like that, okay? If the children are older, have a strategy agreed. If dad gets violent, go and hide in the shed or in the garden or whatever it might be. So these women have been in this situation for a while now, so they know who they are. I know there'll be women listening who will be thinking, yes, she's talking about me. So if you're in that situation, you can do these little things to prepare to help you if you need to escape. And towards the end of the show, we'll give lots of numbers.
Please, if you can.
And assistance in terms of where to get help.
And these were real life snippets that you can actually take on board and start, preparing for if you find yourself in this situation as well. So please, take on board.
Another really important point. So like during lockdown, there are people out there who might not realise that they actually might be able to help somebody who's stuck in lockdown and domestic violence. So if you're a postman, a delivery driver, supermarket delivery, delivering the groceries, or if you're one of the sort of community workers, if you do notice anything when you're out and about, because people aren't out and about as much as they used to be. So if you do notice anything, there's no harm in ringing the police. If you hear violence, if you can hear it when you're posting the letters or something like that, it's amazing how other people within the community can actually look out for your neighbours as well,
Absolutely.
Listen out in case anything like that is going on.
I know where the councils are now. I think it was about week 7 and 8 where they sort of noticed that there was an increase in domestic abuse and the number of deaths. And I think they asked some of the hotels now to open up their rooms for people with, in sort of, not forced marriages, but in domestic or sort of, abuse marriages, should we say. And also councils are providing a lot more services as well. So and that's worth noting. One thing I'm going to ask, and it's a rather sort of controversial thing to say. I know back in the day when a woman was, say, physically hit, one of the things that people used to say, or maybe the partner used to say, was that, she brought it upon herself. Yeah. She provoked me, whether, whatever it may be, if the roti was late or, things weren't cleared up.
There's absolutely no excuse. Absolutely. Do you know, if you don't mind, I would just like to quickly read a poem. I did a project last year when I worked with victims of domestic violence.
Yes.
And recently I did some videos on Twitter and Facebook and things like that, and I just read out some of the poems that these women had written, and I'd just like to read one out to you.
Please.
If I can just find it. So this is called Triggers.
Yeah.
Okay. So this might give you an indication of what it must be like to be this woman. This is a real life story. This was a Pakistani woman who was staying in refuge. When you see a rolling pin or an umbrella or a shoe, what do you see? You see just a rolling pin or an umbrella or a shoe, but not me. Every item triggers a scene in my mind's eye of the pain of DV, domestic violence. Take the rolling pin. I was making chapatis when he came in to the kitchen and told me to go to the shops for him. Let me feed the kids first, I said, and that was enough. He grabbed a rolling pin and he beat me about my head with it. So you see a rolling pin and I see my wounded head. What about an umbrella? You use it to protect you from the rain. Not my husband. He used to use it to hit me, jabbing the pointed end into me with force. So you see an umbrella, but I see the dozens of small round bruises all over my body. Same for the shoe, used as a weapon, and there was nothing I could do. There were kicks and slaps and punches too. And I was pushed down the stairs. Add that to the list too. Broken furniture, broken ornaments, a broken phone, a broken me, and altogether a broken family. And hopefully that gives you some sort of an idea of what it must be like to be a victim. This woman was just the nicest woman you could ever meet. She did everything she could for that husband, but he was an alcoholic, and she hadn't been told this, that he was a drinker when she was just a young girl in Pakistan. She married who her parents told her to. She came here and now obviously she's trying to make a fresh life for herself, but she's stuck in refuge at the moment with her 3 children. But I could tell you hundreds of stories like this. Absolutely. Hundreds and hundreds. It's never justified to beat a woman.
Very, very powerful poem there, and I suppose people do use it, whether it's for themselves or for their family or for their friends. They do try to mitigate and try to explain away why they're doing what they're doing, that they don't want to do it, but they are being forced to do it.
But as you know, it's always a cowardly thing to say it's somebody else's fault. You know, you have to take responsibility for your own actions. And incidentally, she didn't speak English, this woman. She told me this in Urdu, and I made the poem. You know, I sort of translated it and then carved it into a poem. But I think it's really important that, and you know, they had anonymity, and these poems were performed on stage as well last year. So it's really important that actually sometimes we hear from the women themselves and hear what they go through, because it's awful. It's simply awful.
I'm sure you must remember, and some of our listeners might be able to. I think this was a Yorkshire case, Bradford, whereby I think it was a slightly elderly gentleman, and it must have been sort of late 60s, early 70s, and I don't know, I can't remember now for the life of me whether he was his wife or whether he was his daughter-in-law, and I think the roti was cold or something, and she brought her in, and unfortunately, like I said, he was cold, and I don't know what he got, and he beat her to death. And actually that was cited in the court case. You know, he didn't try to make something up that, you know, we got into an argument about something important. He just said, oh, because she brought my food cold to me, I was slightly late. I think it was something along those lines. And he was so blasé, as though the judge or the listening audience, the jury and the judge will take that into account and say, oh yeah, no, you're not going to be guilty. It just shows you.
I had another woman who got married. She was his second wife, came here, and he used to lock her in the flat all day, her and the baby. She couldn't go out. Sometimes she wouldn't have formula milk. She'd have to wait for him to come back in the evening and then go out. And you know, sometimes in the middle of the night he'd say, go and cook a fresh meal for me. I don't want any of the food from last night in the fridge. 3 o'clock in the morning he'd say, go cook for me now. You know, things like that. I just think that you don't marry your wife so she can be your slave. You have a partner. You know, you've got to treat your partner with respect, and I think if you want respect, you've got to give respect as well. So, but sadly, it's power. It's one person has power over the other person feels helpless.
So it's a very good question actually here by Firoza, who said, what anger management programs are there for the perpetrators, as not everyone wants to leave a violent relationship but work towards staying together?
There are perpetrator programs at the moment, and I know that certainly when I give the Birmingham Solihull Women's Ed number later on, they can put you through to the Perpetrators program if you ring them. So I will give a number for that as well. So I mean, there's some debate whether they work or don't work. I'm sure they do sometimes and they don't sometimes. So I think it's got to start when they're young, to be honest. The education, it's got to start when people are young, so they grow up with those values.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, we've got Nazreen here, who's really on a sort of roll here, and she's sort of continued to say, look, there's no real religious text that we can use that allows a man to beat their partner. Absolutely. So I think that's quite categorical. I don't think anyone is going to use that at all as well. And, you know, there's another sort of person who's saying that poem that you read was really powerful, and his thoughts and our prayers are with that particular woman now. So I think there's, you know, it's really coming to front. So, you know, for those of you who just joined, the number is 01216829735. We've got about 15 minutes left or so to the end of the show. It's been already a real powerful show with data showing that there has been more than 100% increase in
160% in the deaths.
So 160% in deaths since the start of COVID lockdown as well. So it just shows that, you know, at the moment, you know, for those families that are sort of living under each other's feet, there has been an escalation in abuse. And also there's, you know, less likely chance of you asking for help as well. So because the support may not be readily available, or you're not able to leave the house as well. So, you know, and also the fact that, you know, your normal circle of friends aren't there because they aren't able to come and visit you no more and give you that sort of support network that you would maybe need. And also sometimes, you know, language is a real barrier, or being an IT literate, you know, now everything is all online. You have to go, and like I said, you know, you'd be surprising to see how many people aren't, you know, either on social networks or aren't able to sort of, you know, use IT for basic IT access as well. So I think sometimes we have to understand that there's a community, there's a hard to reach community out there, and, you know, sometimes we don't have to look through our own lens. We have to sort of almost detach ourselves and put ourselves into their shoes.
And it's all about It's about doing what's right. It's about justice. It's about if somebody is vulnerable. And I mean, what kind of society do we live in where women have to ring a helpline, cowering in their back garden because they're so scared and they have nobody to turn to?
Yeah.
And I think that's a real indictment on society, isn't it? It's a real indictment that our women in our society feel like they have nowhere to go and nobody to turn to.
Yeah, just to sort of follow up on Sister Nazreen Qamar, her point about this, the effect that this has on their children as well, and also the fact that, you know, it's normally any son or daughter really, I mean both parents, but they do sort of idolize their father as well.
Can I just say the poem that I read, that lady, her children were terrified of umbrellas because they'd seen their dad beat their mum with the, you know, with the jagged end, with the pointed end of the umbrella. So you know what, these kind of images live on with the children.
Absolutely.
And if they see their mum traumatized, it's not something that they can easily get out their head.
Yeah. And it's also learned behavior as well, isn't it, Abda? Whereby, you know, I'm sure there's, you know, strong statistic and evidence to suggest that if for example, a boy has seen his father, you know, take it out on his wife, for example, there's a good chance that when he grows up as well, he will try to sort of imitate and follow in his father's footsteps as well. I can't unfortunately quote that statistic for you, but there is some strong.
I think ultimately we are responsible for our own actions, but certainly upbringing has an effect on our outlook and the way we see things. So I think you know that is a point that we need to think about as well, like, you know, what kind of an upbringing does that child have? Yeah,
no, most definitely. So, and also, you know, apart from the actual partner who's suffering the domestic abuse, is there any support for the children, as we're saying, for them to be counselled and for them to sort of...
So if you contact one of the domestic violence organisations, charities, they will be able to refer the children on to get help as well.
Okay, I think these days, I mean, it's not a, you know, one individual organization or an agency's approach. You know, a number of agencies, so multidisciplinary approach is taken. So you have the social workers, you will have women's organizations, you will have the police, you'll have the council, you know, maybe the mental health, you'll have a GP, maybe, you know, you'll have about 6-7 people around the table and supporting you as well and trying to get you through this particular process, get you accommodation, get you, you know, schooling for your children if that's, you know, what you need, making sure you get the right income, the mental health aspect, counselling, whatever is needed.
Yeah, so certainly for the most serious offences, they do have the MARAC, which is the multi-agency reference sort of conference, and there you do have the police, the women's you know, worker, you have possibly the school, you have the GP, the doctor, so you have all social worker, all the different agencies get together and draw up a plan as how to best protect the woman and the children with the most serious offences. But you know, if you enlist the help of any charity, they will do their best to help you. You know, if you want to escape or if you want to just manage the way you live within that environment. There's lots and lots of different ways in which this can be done. Lots and lots of different ways. But I just wanted to say that before we go on to the helpline numbers, just wanted to say that some of our listeners or viewers might not know this, but if you are in danger, obviously you can call 999. Even if you don't say anything, the line will stay open for 45 seconds. So you've got 45 seconds within which to say something before it gets cut. And the thing with 999 is they can trace usually the address or where you're calling from, but sometimes a woman might not be able to phone 999 and say, can I have the police please, because you know, they might be in a situation where, you know, he's right there or she's being threatened. So there's something called the silent solution system. You can press 55 on your mobile phone. So if you remember 55, and the operator will then transfer the call to the relevant police force. And the call handler will ask you a series of questions that you can give very short answers to, like yes, no. Like they'll ask you, are you in danger? Yes. And so the only thing with ringing from a mobile phone is they can't necessarily track your location. Okay. But the silent solution system, so if you're, you know, in a fix where you can't really speak properly, then there might be an option for women who are in immediate danger. Yeah, no, thank you, Abda. We've still got about another 10 minutes, so I'm going to ask again the listeners and the viewers here, you know, if there's anything that you would like to share with us. Have you heard anything? Have you seen anything, you know, within your road or within your street that you know that there's some sort of domestic violence, and what is it about,
you know, for example, if you know something's going on, but you don't want to report it, you know, you're always thinking, no, you can't be right, it's not none of my business. So you see, so you're in that sort of, you know, difficult dilemma. I'm sure you've probably been in a situation where maybe a friend of yours has confided in you, but she's asked you not to forward that.
A lot of the time, the victim won't want to do. The problem is, as soon as you tell somebody, then you kind of feel like you've got to do something about it, and often they're not ready to do anything about it, and you can't take that power away from the woman because all the other power's been taken from her. So it's got to be her who decides how she deals with it, whether she leaves him or whether she tries to deal with it in-house, or, you know, whatever it might be, whether she gets help by, you know, being able to access services but stay in the house. So it's, you know, you know, you can't decide for the woman what she should do. She has to decide for herself.
So she has to make that decision.
She has to make that decision. It's her decision.
Absolutely. So one very good point actually by Brother Javed here, who says some of the sisters from abroad also have issues with their visa and or indefinite leave, leaving them trapped in that abusive relationship. So they want to obviously make the marriage work, but then, you know, the last thing they want to be doing is then being sent home because obviously, you know, the burden of being on the parent.
So let's clarify this point. So if you're in that position and you have no recourse to public funds and you're dependent, but if you suffer domestic violence, then you will get leave to remain. You need to just go see a solicitor who deals with immigration, and you will get leave to remain because there's an exemption. There's what they call the DV exemption, domestic violence exemption. If you're suffering domestic violence, you will get leave to remain. You will get passport.
So even if the partner hasn't been convicted of DV, or does he have to be convicted first?
No, as long as I think it's really important that you contact the police and let them know, and contact one of the helplines perhaps and access some of their services, because at the end of the day, you and obviously there's another thing that I think I haven't mentioned yet is go to the doctor. Go to the doctor and get it on record. If you are suffering domestic violence, often you find that's the only time that the woman is alone. Sometimes they don't have, going to see the doctor is sometimes the only time where the perpetrator is not with them. So it's an opportunity actually, and the doctor may be able to refer you to services that can help you in that situation. So go see your doctor, get it logged, you can talk to the police and ask them not to take any action, and they will still log it as a crime. They will still give it a number, they'll give it a crime reference, they'll be led by you. And I certainly know that this is absolutely true, that the police will, they will go when you are ready to go. So, but you know, that's at least something that you can do to help you to get your stay.
I mean, I don't know whether I've actually seen this on some of the soaps whereby actually someone has reported noise and sort of, you know, bit of fracas going on in their house, maybe a neighbour, and the police have come quite heavily handed, and you know, they've seen, you know, obviously things aren't quite right, and they've, you know, not sort of taken the woman's view to account, and they've just arrested the partner. The prime example actually is this recent celebrity that passed. Well, no, she didn't pass away. She committed suicide. Actually, I forget her name. Apology. Whereby, you know, both of them are celebrities. I think, and he went obviously on Caroline Flack. Absolutely. She was a Love Island presenter. Now he's coming back to me. And she didn't want. I think she was a perpetrator, wasn't she? So the husband or the partner didn't want this to be proceeded, but the CPS and the police wanted to pursue it.
That's right.
And unfortunately, she just couldn't deal with the publicity and the shame and whatever the fallout. I think that's a better word.
And obviously, she must have had some depression or some, you know, some sort of like, you know, she obviously needed some sort of help, and then she didn't feel like she could get that help, and that's important as well. Your mental health is very important as well.
It really takes a battery. So I can fully understand what you're saying, and sometimes I think this is where the police have to be careful as well, and you got to understand that you've got children here, and it has to be right for the woman, for her to, I mean, if she's not going to testify, or if she doesn't want to take it forward, then unfortunately all you're doing is you're actually making both of them sort of even more entrenched in their positions and very hard to come back.
And I think sometimes the court process can be a very daunting thing. So I know that certainly, like Women's Aid, for example, they have you know, workers who will go into court with you, who will assist you. So there are services out there to help make this a lot easier for you. In terms of, you know, sort of getting justice, if you like.
Thank you. Well, as always, time has beaten us, and we are now at the end of our show. It has, I'm actually now emotionally knackered. There's a lot to take in as well, and some of the stories that you were saying, so it's not easy, when you are on the front line and supporting people who, unfortunately their lives are at risk and their children and their marriages at stake. I'm sure there's a lot to take in. So, all the people that are involved in terms of the support they are offering, my hat's off to you. It's not easy, and then being able to sort of park it when you go home as well. It's an enormous burden, but certainly a valuable work that you are offering. I do know that you wanted to share a few helpline numbers and websites, so I'm going to give you that platform now.
That's fine. We've got the 24-hour National Domestic Abuse Helpline, which you can ring anytime, day or night. That's the national one. So it's 0808 2000 247.
Yeah.
Or you can go online to nationaldahelpline.org.uk.
Yeah.
Or you can, the local Women's Aid helpline is 0808 800 0028. Don't worry about the language, because they always have interpreters. They use language lines. So if you can't speak the languages, if you tell them what language you want to speak in, they will arrange that. And their website is bswaid.org. And there's an Asian women's charity called Roshni. If women feel more comfortable, ring an Asian Women's Centre. That's 0800 953 9666. And there's also the Muslim Women's Network UK helpline, which is 0800 999 5786.
5786, yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you. That's great, useful website. And there's a lot more information available from the websites and from various leaflets as well. And like I said, as Sister Abda said here previously, you can go to your GP, you can go to your neighbours, you can phone the police. There's a lot of other support services that are available, but these are some phone numbers that you can phone, especially the first one.
You're not alone. And can I just say, you're not alone. But honestly, the minute you reach out, your life does change. And I think a lot of the time women stuck in domestic violence situations feel like they're very alone, and they are for that time, but the minute you reach out, you'll find there are a lot of people out there that really do want to help.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to sort of, if you can, we've discussed quite a lot. I'm going to, ask you to just sort of, give your overriding sort of summary or concluding remarks for our listeners, and we will try to get Sister Abda here maybe once every maybe a few months, really, if that's okay.
That's
fantastic.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
So I think it's been a great show, actually, in terms of you've managed to extract good information out of me, and I think that it is important that we talk about these difficult issues. And I think my main concern is if there's anybody out there that is suffering at the moment and feels very alone and doesn't know which way to go, which way to turn, please do think about reaching out for help, one way or another. Whether it's if it's an emergency, please don't hesitate to ring the police. If 5 women a week are killed in this country at the moment because of lockdown, don't become the next one. Reach out, get help. And if you want to take a more measured approach and ring one of the helplines, they are there to help you. They will help you in whichever way is most comfortable for you. And I think that we can't take this issue seriously enough, to be honest. And
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of work to be done still. And I think we all have to do it as a community, to be honest. So.
Thank you. That was Sister Abda here, who's championing the cause of people that are being or find themselves in a abusive marriage or relationship as well. So my essence is that the last 3 months has taken an enormous toll on our relationships. Please do reach out for help if you need it. There has been an escalation in abuse, but all I would say is a good relationship, a good marriage needs a bit of compromise, a bit of patience, a bit of tolerance. I know it's tough times, but we are seeing the end of the light as well. So sooner or later we'll be back to our normal lives as well, and hopefully we will see a decrease in the number of abusive deaths as well. So on that note, I hope you found the program useful and educational. We will have Sister Abda here once more in a few months' time, maybe on another topic. So if you would like to hear anything more around about women issues, let us know, and we will endeavour our best to get Abda here and
perhaps I'll get to talk about gaslighting.
Absolutely. Yeah. So please take care and look after yourselves until next week, and take care. Please, bye now.